Welcome back to the BC City Connection podcast. Richard Pyatt here. This is the official podcast from Battle Creek, Michigan. You'll find these episodes where you find podcasts. Subscribe, we invite you to, so you'll be alerted when these episodes come available. You might also be watching us on YouTube or Access Vision, or hearing us on another potential place, like the website for the city. So thank you, however you're finding us. You may have heard many times about something called FOIA. Freedom of Information Act is what that stands for. And the city of Battle Creek now has a new fancy kind of portal to submit a request for such a thing. City Attorney Bill Kim is here to talk to us a little bit about what that's all about. Hello, sir.
Hi, good afternoon.
Well, thanks for this opportunity to catch up and understand this. I suppose it makes sense to start by asking, what is FOIA anyway?
Okay, well, thanks, Richard, and thank you for giving me a chance to come on here. I honestly really appreciate getting a chance to, reach out to your audience. I guess FOIA is the Freedom of Information Act, and it's a Michigan statute that basically requires that the city provide public records to the public upon request. And there's some conditions, and the statutes a lot of legal language and things like that, but our goal is to make sure that we're complying with our legal requirements under state law, and that we're conducting city government in an open and transparent fashion. So part of that is making sure that we are in compliance with the FOIA, and are able to provide those records to people in a timely and sufficient fashion, basically.
Mm-hmm. Right. So transparency, that's the key word, I think, in what you just said. Sometimes, though, what would be a situation, an example of what this might do if it didn't automatically happen, transparency?
Well, I think, the kind of example for that is if you look at Lansing, the legislature's passed the FOIA, to the Freedom of Information Act, to apply to, state agencies and to local municipalities, but, it doesn't apply to the governor's office right now. It doesn't apply to the legislature itself. So, it's much more difficult to get records and that kind of thing out of those offices than it is out of, the line state agencies that people deal with, and their local governments.
Hmm. Sometimes when you request Freedom of Information Act, when you process that information, it comes back with some redacted information. Typically, that means there is some information in there that's sensitive or confidential, and so there are steps taken with regard to that, is there not?
Yeah, there are basically two kinds of redactions. There's what we call mandatory redactions, where we by law are basically required to do so. The main ones for those is things like, we have a lot of records with people's social security numbers on them. People don't want their social security numbers out there for obvious reasons. Also, there's the Crime Victim Rights Act, which prohibits us from basically distributing images of a crime victim, and certain other information related to crime victims. So we want to be cognizant of those cases. And also, there's also in a lot of cases a balancing act about just general privacy considerations for people, competing with the right people's right to see what their government does. So,
Hmm.
just because, for example, a lot of police reports are subject to FOIA, but a lot of people, will want to be able to, communicate tips or things like that confidentially. And there's that, that would be one of those redactions that we would be doing to try to protect our sources and protect people who are working with our police department.
Okay, makes sense. So, what is different about this new process to request, to make a FOIA request as opposed to before?
I guess that we've tried to streamline the process a lot by moving things to an online, we call it our online FOIA portal, so that basically people can, instead of having to come down to City Hall and fill out a form or print out a form and take it down to City Hall or mail it in, you can just get on your phone, get it on your computer, visit the portal site and kind of type in the information that fill out an online form and submit it that way. Um, and just it'll help in a lot of ways and help us to make sure that we're keeping track of everything and help the requesters, make sure that what they're saying is clear and uh, understandable, and that they can, facilitate getting their information back electronically as well. So,
There's also a status update that comes with that too, with this new online portal. Isn't that true?
yeah, because we've moved most of that to the online portal, it lets us do, I guess, kind of process communication type stuff a little bit easier. Um, it doesn't, we don't have to, pay for a stamp to send out a mail saying we received this, but we can just send out an email and go, we've received it and it's, in process or whatever it is.
Hmm. Okay. So help us understand then what happens after the FOIA request is submitted.
Well, internally, what happens is that we have staff who basically review the FOIA request to, I guess, make sure that it's a valid request. There's reasons why it might not be. For example, people who are currently incarcerated can't submit FOIA requests, um, other things like that, and then they identify which departments it would need to get routed to. Those departments, will review their files and identify any particularly potentially responsive records. A lot of internal communication going on to, via email and phone and things like that. And uh, eventually they'll be able to either produce the records or send a, request for a deposit before we produce the records. Um, and that all happens within the statutory timeframes of, basically 5 to 15 days effectively.
Okay, so not a whole lot of time happens between the request and the satisfying of that. It's a fairly short time.
Yeah, it is.
Is there money involved? That is to say, if somebody submits a FOIA request, do they have to pay?
It depends on how long it takes to basically do the search and locate the records, and how long it takes to review and potentially redact the records. So, short requests for like individual documents. I'd say well, that's a special case, but like, short police reports would be, potentially, potentially even so short that there might not be a cost. But if somebody, is requesting 30 hours of video, that's going to require at least 30 hours of staff time to essentially review to, to determine if, any of like the Crime Victim Rights Act, for example, we're not supposed to release images of victims. So if in a case where, and other things, like, along those lines there. So it's going to vary depending on the size of the request and, really how much the person is asking for.
Right. If we stick with that 30-hour example, now we're talking about significant staff time involved in the redacting process. So then you expect that there would be some kind of a fee involved.
Generally, yeah, I would expect so. And there's also potentially, a fee for printing and duplication. If we send them their files electronically, there isn't that. But if somebody wants a hard copy, a printed record or something, there's going to be a, per page printing fee or whatever that, or a duplication fee.
I'm not asking for stats or anything. I'm just curious. Does this happen a lot? I mean, do you receive a fair amount of FOIA requests?
Well, I guess last year, looking at 2024, when the FOIA was largely being handled by the clerk's office, I believe they handled roughly about 3,500 FOIA requests throughout the entire year,
Oh my.
maybe a little bit north of that. But, and we've already gotten, since we put the online system in place on January 1st, we've already received, I believe, 2 to 300, somewhere in that general ballpark. So
Okay.
so it's pretty comparable. There's a lot of, requests going on for different things, and, we just process them and deal with them.
So I presume that's somewhat average for a town our size, 3,500 in a year. Is that your experience just generally?
Um, having only worked for two, well, I've worked for three, but having only kind of looked at the numbers like that for two, I guess it seems pretty comparable.
Okay.
Um, a lot of those requests, I mean, the bulk of those requests are going to be for things like accident reports and police reports and things like that. So, um, yeah, those are what they are basically.
Yeah, a more routine type requests. I mean, obviously, sometimes the notion of a FOIA submission is something that is media related. Maybe there is, dare I say, some kind of sensationalism around that story, and so the FOIA request sounds maybe impressive than the average one. But as you're pointing out, these are fairly routine.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's occasionally ones that are really large and for whatever reason, but it's we're doing what we're required to do in the statute and trying to do so at basically a minimum cost to the Battle Creek taxpayers.
Hmm. All right. I presume that this online way of doing this is pretty standard now. This is the way entities, municipalities are going.
I think more and more municipalities and agencies are moving to that kind of model of uh, just because that's how we communicate these days. It's how we get our bills by email. We get we get we get notifications by text for everything. So it's just people use their phones to do this sort of thing that before people would. A lot of people I remember 20 years ago it seemed like a lot of people would have a printer in their house. These days a lot of people don't even have printers anymore because
Hmm.
they don't really need one. So
Yeah, I can relate to that. Sometimes you say, "Why am I buying this ink?"
yeah.
I don't really use it too much. Yeah, things have changed, haven't they? Well,
Mhm.
there is an information page on the City of Battle Creek website as it relates to this, and also the link to the portal so that you can follow that link and submit a Freedom of Information Act request at the City of Battle Creek if you wish to. And we'll link that information in the show notes for this episode of the BC City Connection so that you're able to click through easily if you need to. Battle Creek City Attorney William Kim, thank you for the info.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me on.